All right. Hey there, and welcome to MS101, Individual Movement Techniques and Basic Team and Squad Movements. Now, look, this is actually considered a supplemental lesson that I put together because I do know a lot of programs split their leadership labs a little differently in the spring versus the fall. Our program, we actually do squad level movements in the fall, and then we move up into platoon movements in the spring. So because of that, I developed this lesson just for MS1s at a very basic level and new MS2s that didn't do MS101 or 102, just to give a very broad idea of the individual movement techniques and the basic team and squad movements. So that's what the point of this specific supplemental lesson is. With that, if you've watched my videos before, you already know that that QR code right there is going to lead you to a live website version of the same exact lesson that you can work through at your own pace and also access some embedded links and videos on your own time that will give you just a little bit more in-depth information regarding the concepts we're going to cover. Now, always, I recommend having a piece of paper or a Word doc open, get a pen and pencil out, take some notes, because this lesson has some information that you probably want to keep in mind, especially since the main parts of these you're going to be applying in real time at a lab someday, hopefully, or an FTX, and certainly at that wonderful place called Cadet Summer Training. So with that, this right here is going to give you those two embedded links. There's the Squad Tactics Refresher, a student read ahead that's available to you. And then I also have an older YouTube video that just talks about the basic movements that I'll also link to this video at the end. So you can go back and look at that as well, but it's going to be a lot of the same information. All right, so what do I want you to get out of this lesson? Well, we're going to discuss the purpose of a security perimeter, so I want you to be able to understand that as well as the understanding of security in general. I also want you to be able to describe and understand the 3 individual movement techniques, or IMTs, that we implement while we're moving under direct fire. I also want you to be able to explain the purpose of using hand and arm signals, understand the composition of an infantry fire team and the infantry rifle squad, as well as describe their movements and formations. So with that, we're going to start with an introduction video. It's going to go over just a few things that we're going to talk about, but this way, since I'm just talking at you through a screen, you can kind of see it demonstrated in a little bit easier way to comprehend.
Individual movement techniques are the building blocks to successfully moving with your unit while under fire. All soldiers must learn these techniques and practice them regularly. There are 3 individual movement techniques used when moving under fire: high crawl, low crawl, and rush. Before moving, you must first select the next spot to go to and the best possible route to that spot. You must search the terrain to your front for features that provide cover or concealment. Cover provides protection from bullets and fragmentation while also concealing you from enemy observation. Cover can be natural or man-made. Concealment is anything that will hide you from enemy observation but does not protect you from enemy fire. Good sources of cover or concealment are a gully, ravine, ditch, or wall at a slight angle to the direction of movement. These features provide both cover and concealment when using the low or high crawl. Hedgerows or thick vegetation provide concealment when using the low or high crawl. Large rocks, trees, fallen timber, stumps, rubble, vehicle hulks, folds or creases in the ground. These features can provide cover and concealment for use as temporary positions. Use the rush if the area between them has no concealment. High grass or weeds. This only offers partial concealment. Use the rush since the use of the high or low crawl could be detected due to the movement of vegetation. Select the next position and the route to it based on the following criteria. Exposes you to the least amount of enemy fire. Doesn't require you to move in front of other members of your element. Communicate your plan with your buddy so that he can cover you until you reach your next position. When moving as a member of a fire team, the team leader will select the best route and control covering fire. Stay with your team leader and follow his example. The high crawl is selected when the route provides cover and concealment, poor visibility reduces enemy observation, and speed is required. Keep your body off the ground. Rest your weight on your forearms and lower legs. Cradle your weapon in your arms, keeping its muzzle off the ground. Keep your knees well behind your buttocks so it stays low. Move forward by alternately advancing your right elbow and left knee, and left elbow and right knee. The low crawl is selected when the route provides cover or concealment less than 1 foot in height. Visibility provides the enemy good observation, and speed is not required. Keep your body as flat as possible to the ground. Hold your weapon by grasping the sling at the upper sling swivel, letting the handguard rest on your forearm and the butt of the weapon drag on the ground, thus keeping the muzzle off the ground. Move forward by first pushing both arms forward and pulling your right leg forward, then pulling with both arms and pushing with your right leg. Continue this push-pull method, changing legs as necessary until you reach your next position. The rush is selected when there is no cover or concealment along your route and/or enemy fire allows brief exposure. Roll or crawl away from your current firing position. Raise your body by straightening your arms and springing to your feet. Run to your next position, keeping the distance short and trying not to stay on your feet longer than 3 to 5 seconds so the enemy cannot track you with automatic fire or bring accurate fire onto you. Plant both feet just before hitting the ground and fall forward by grasping the heel of the butt of your weapon and using the butt of your weapon to break your fall. Assume a firing position in a covered location if possible and cover your buddy's movement. When moving as a member of a buddy team, it is imperative that the team has a communication plan worked out and clearly understood. Under no circumstances should an individual be moving without cover from the other. Individual movement techniques require practice and coordination to be successful. Your unit's ability to move under fire is directly tied to your ability to execute these techniques. Formations are arrangements of elements and individuals in relation to one another. Teams use formations for control, flexibility, and security. Team leaders travel up front in formations. This allows team leaders to lead by example. All members of the fire team must be able to see their team leader. The team leader will normally choose a formation based on MET TC. Fire teams use 2 basic formations when maneuvering: the fire team wedge and the fire team file. The wedge is the basic formation for the fire team. There are normally 10 meters between individuals, but this is not set in stone. The wedge is designed to be relatively flexible, and the interval between members is increased or decreased based on a variety of conditions. Leaders may direct the wedge to expand or contract based on visibility, terrain, enemy threat, etc. The file is used when the wedge has been collapsed or contracted to the point where members are traveling almost one behind the other. This can be caused by a number of different circumstances, the 2 most common being extremely limited visibility and very dense vegetation. Members resume the wedge as soon as conditions permit. The leader of the unit will determine which of these formations to use that best fits the current situation. The unit will move back and forth from wedge to file multiple times during a unit's movement.
All right, so now you have kind of an overview of what we're talking about. That there's a little bit of information that's been updated since that video came out, but it does give a good broad idea and an actual visual of what I'm going to walk you through. Now let's talk security basics. So this is just a thrown together idea of a security perimeter, right? And the way I'm going to describe this one is you've got your MS3s right in here having their little panic attacks because they're planning an operation and maybe it's the first time. Now, hopefully that's not actually the case in your program, but it's going to be a little hectic in here. All these little black dots out here are going to be the basic course cadets for the most part, typically your MS1s and 2s, pulling security facing outward. Now, this is to make sure that your lead planners and your key leaders in here are protected, covered with 360-degree security, so they can just focus on the tasks that they're working on in here. And each of these folks have a sector of fire. You can see my cursor going out that overlaps, and your team leader is going to go to you and tell you exactly what your sector of fire is. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds on exactly what this should look like, but this is just a typical, very easy to understand security perimeter and why you're out here in the prone with your weapon facing out looking for enemy in these general areas. Now, we also want to keep security while we're moving, and that idea is the formations are going to provide 360-degree security, and you keeping what we call your head on a swivel and having situational awareness, constantly looking around, keeping your eyes and ears open for anybody out and around you. That's also part of pulling security and making sure that you are keeping security as a priority at all times. So, security basics. Right here we've got a photo, and I want you to take a look and just, what do you notice? What do you notice about security from all 5 members of that team or squad that you can see there in the photo? Notice the way people are facing, the way their weapons are facing. Even though they've got sunglasses on, where are their eyes facing? Can you see that their bodies are moving around? You've got somebody facing forward, you've got the rear guy facing to the back. Do you feel that these 5 folks are pulling good security? Do you feel like they've got a heightened level of security between all of them? That's just something to analyze and think about. Now, another portion of security is what we call cover and concealment, and there is a very distinct difference. I want you to remember that cover is protection from gunfire, right? That protects you from bullets. Technical definition is protection from the effects of direct and indirect fires. Now, like you saw in the video, cover can be walls, it can be handmade, man-made, they can be natural features such as coulees, the sides of cliffs. Anything that can stop a bullet from hitting you can be considered cover. Now, concealment is great, but it can't stop a bullet. It just protects you from being seen. Or the technical definition, it provides protection from observation and surveillance. Now, ultimately, we're always looking for cover, but concealment can work as well. And try to make sure that you understand the difference between the two. All right, so let's talk those IMTs, or the individual movement techniques. Now, you saw all 3 demonstrated, as well as the rush when used as a buddy rush between multiple people. But we're just going to focus on the high crawl, low crawl, and individual rush. Now, how we use those, like you said in the video, is going to depend on the terrain and your enemy contact. So that high crawl, it's a little bit faster than a low crawl, but not as fast as the rush, we use when we have cover and concealment, and poor visibility reduces enemies from being able to see us. Now, speed needs to be required to use the high crawl because it's not the fastest technique, but it's also not nearly as slow as the low crawl. So if you need to get somewhere fast and you have cover and concealment, the high crawl is the way to go. The low crawl, on the other hand, you are flat to the ground and it takes a long time to get anywhere. So you use this when you don't have enough cover and concealment to utilize the high crawl as your kind of barrier from being seen. So low crawl, when the grass or foliage is less than a foot high and you don't have to get there fast. That's when you would use the low crawl. Now the rush, that's when you have no cover or concealment or it's real low and enemy fire only allows for brief exposure, which means you need to get somewhere fast. The rush is going to be what we call the 3 to 5 second rush because you only want to be up and running for 3 to 5 seconds. The old saying that I learned back when I joined was, as soon as you get up, you say, I'm up. He sees me, I'm down. And that'll give you about the amount of time that you should be up in the air. Now, something to remember, as I talked about in the video, when you do a rush, as soon as you land, before you take off again, think about like in video games where you respawn and you've got the campers just waiting for you. You want to make sure that you roll out of that position into a different area, even if it's only a few feet, just because if the enemy is watching and you're using that rush, which you likely are, right? You can be seen if you pop right back up in the exact same spot. So always keep in mind when you're doing a rush, either as soon as you land or right before you take off again, you need to roll first before you jump up. So again, your IMTs are that high crawl, low crawl, and rush. Your next step is then to go out and practice doing those. And I'll tell you what, that low crawl is a great workout. This is what they're going to look like in real time. So high crawl up on those elbows and knees, low crawl as flat to the ground as you can possibly get. And the 3 to 5 second rush is up, he sees me, I'm down. The rush actually needs quite a bit of practice because breaking the fall is what is the most difficult thing to master. So you can do the rush up and down without a weapon, but I do encourage you to get with some people that can walk you through and practice with actually holding a dummy rifle. All right, so what about hand and arm signals? Why do we use them? Well, we use them to control formations and individuals and to give some information while we're on patrol. They're used when we can't use our voice or radios or anything like that. We have to have the lowest signature possible. So they're simple and efficient, and they keep us pretty low profile. However, hand and arm signals are just a whole second language. So they have to be planned and rehearsed. You have to study them. You have to understand what they are. We as an Army have some basic ones that if you click on this link right down here, it'll take you to dismounted hand and arm signals that are typically taught and understood by every soldier. But some companies or platoons, even squads, will have their own standard operating procedure or SOP that's going to distinguish some other ones. So you'll need to get to know those and practice them. Now they can be used for everything, right? They can be used to lift or shift fire, start an assault, order or withdrawal, maybe signal an all clear. And for the most part, what we see a lot of is stopping and starting movement of a patrol, as well as signaling things like the distance that you're at. Biggest thing, again, I can't say this enough, they have to be known by everybody in the formation or patrol, because if you're passing it back to somebody that doesn't know what it means, they're not going to be able to do the action or understand what information is being pushed back. Now, with that, what's also important is understanding passing it back and receiving it from people in front of you. So that's where those security basics kind of come in and how important it is to keep your head on a swivel and also to maintain visual distance from at least one person in your patrol or your formation, because you need to be able to check and see if they're sending back information via hand and arm signal. If somebody is whispering your name or even yelling your name to get your attention because you're not paying attention to them, then you're missing key information and you're slowing everybody down. So keep your head on a swivel, watch the person in front of you, and always remember if you get past a hand and arm signal or if you see it, make sure you pass it back to the people behind you as well. All right, so now let's talk organization of our teams and squads. So we'll start at the basic. The fire team is the smallest, most basic element of the entire military, of the entire Army. So it's a 4-person team, typically has the team leader, rifleman, grenadier, and an automatic rifleman. Now, for basic fundamental understanding purposes, we use the infantry fire team and the infantry rifle squad for our understanding and our examples. Know that this could look different depending on the branch, depending on the unit, but for basics and understanding, we're using the infantry fire team. Now, the weapons that this team carries are the M4 rifle, a grenade launcher, or the M203, or the M320, and an automatic rifle or the M249. Now here you can see the example. This is your team leader. Use this legend down here to understand all the acronyms. The Army is full of acronyms. It's a whole second language, just like hand and arm signals. But your leader right here is your team leader. Now, depending on your program, this could be an MS2 or an MS3. Then they're going to have a grenadier, which has the grenade launcher. They're also going to have an automatic rifleman, which has just a larger automatic rifle, right? The M249 is a 5.56 caliber weapon that has an automatic component to it. And then you've got your rifleman. Now these ranks aren't necessarily permanent, but for educational purposes, understand that typically and ideally your team leader is a sergeant, which is an NCO, and this is in real life, real Army. Your grenadier and automatic rifleman, ideally specialists, is of a rank, and then your rifleman is going to be a private first class rank. Now the purpose of this fire team, they have different weapons for different types of targets. So this person here, the team leader and the rifleman, just carry an M4 rifle. Your grenadier has grenades. Now that's not just necessarily shrapnel grenades or frag grenades. That could also be smoke or illumination rounds. There's all types of things that they can shoot out of that weapon. And then your automatic rifleman is going to have the same ammo type as the two on the two ends, but it's going to move at a far faster pace. So they would be utilized for other types of targets. So different weapons, different targets. We have a balance of firepower, right? We've got pretty slow, low rifles here, but then we've got our big gun here. And then simplified logistics just means coming down to a team level. We know that every single team, ideally, will have the same firepower, same capabilities, same weapons. Now, as far as their movement formations, we use these formations going from one place to another. We don't just willy-nilly everybody say, out of the alpha, move to the next spot, right? We do it in a very standardized and functional fashion. We use that formation idea depending on the type, but formations are used for control, security, flexibility, and fire capability. And we utilize and choose which formation to use depending on these things. So for example, as we talked in the video, the main basic formation at the lowest level is the fire team wedge. Now, I wonder why it's called a wedge. Well, it looks a little bit like a triangle, right? Team leader here in the front, automatic rifleman off to one side with the grenadier on the other, and the rifleman on the same side as the grenadier. You do want to keep typically a 10-meter interval between soldiers, but like I said, that can expand and contract depending on your terrain. You can get wider and you can get a little bit closer, but ideally you want to keep at least 10 meters in between yourselves. And then we've got the fire team file, which is, if you think about kindergarten, right, line leader. We've got just a follow the leader style formation here. This is only used when our terrain or visibility keeps us from being able to use the wedge. So let's say you're in really dense foliage, really dense mountains, or it's just too dark to be able to see each other. The wedge has easier control because you just follow the person directly in front of you, but you still want to maintain that 10 meters in between each person. And then you want to get back to the wedge as soon as the terrain permits. And we do that because we know that the wedge has better security, it's got better flexibility, and it's got better control of the different weapons and being utilized going different ways. So this is only used when we can't use the wedge. Now this chart here probably looks familiar from the video. This is going to tell you when we use it, depending on the formation, and those 4 characteristics and purposes of formations, how they're seen in each formation type. So in the wedge, it's our basic team formation with easy control, good flexibility, we can get firepower out in all directions, and it's got good security. Whereas the fire team file, used in dense vegetation, has the easiest control as far as movement goes. It's less flexible than the wedge, we have immediate firepower to the flanks, so to the sides, but we only have one person in the front and one person in the rear. So that makes it more difficult and causes it to be less secure. And now we're going to move up to the infantry rifle squad. Now, if you notice here, it's just 2 fire teams and a squad leader in charge of both. So it now has 9 people. We have a squad leader, 2 team leaders, 2 riflemen, 2 grenadiers, and 2 automatic riflemen. The weapons are going to remain the same, where you have an M4 rifle, grenadier has the grenade launcher, and then an automatic rifle. 2 teams means we just have double of what we already talked about. And then the squad leader also carries just the rifle. Now the teams are going to be labeled Alpha, Bravo. Sometimes you'll see Charlie team. So the teams will be labeled, that way they know which one they belong to. And the purpose of this infantry rifle squad is to provide a base of fire, provide security, and then conduct fire and movement. Now, in follow-on lessons, you'll learn a little bit more about the roles that each person plays and what responsibilities they have in terms of movement, formations, and falling under direct fire, but we're not going to talk that today. Now, as far as our formations, you'll notice something here. This formation, when it's in a squad style, is called a squad column, but you'll notice that it's 2 fire team wedges on top of each other. So we've got this Alpha team is going to be leading, squad leader right in the middle, and then Bravo team is behind. Another thing you might notice is that they're mirrored. So the team leader directly in the center, but your automatic riflemen are going to be on opposite sides, so that we have a balance of firepower each way. Grenadier, same thing, opposite sides, and riflemen are going to be on opposite sides, really in charge of this rear security. This automatic rifleman is going to be able to conduct all of this security, and this automatic rifleman up here can pull security for all of this. So we have a good balance of firepower and control over our bigger weapons. So just remember that the squad column is 2 wedges directly on top of each other with the squad leader in the center. Now a squad line still has 2 fire team wedges. However, they're next to each other rather than in front of and behind. Same thing, your squad leader is going to remain in the middle, and they're going to keep their automatic rifles closest to them for the most control over their firepower. So that's why this one falls under control. Now the team leaders will be in the front, and you can imagine that this is moving up, like moving forward this way. A lot of people will get a squad line and a squad file mixed up because we typically think of lines being follow the person in front of you. In this case, a line is left to right, moving forward. And again, you'll see that these wedges mirror each other. Now for the final one, we've got the squad file. And there's some flexibility with where the leaders go within this one, but it's just like the team file. Everybody's just following the next. We don't stay in this for very long. It's got great control of movement because you're just following the person in front of you. But your alpha team leader will be in the lead. And then the squad leader can decide where they want to go. So they can either be right here in the center and have good control over both teams, or they can move up to the front so they can control this automatic rifleman better. And then with that, your team leader can either be directly in the front of their team and Bravo team, or they can move back too. So this one's got a little bit of flexibility of who goes where. It's really up to your squad leader who's going to belong in what portion of the file. But just remember, this is going follow the leader style. So we have another chart for this one that you can use, pause it, take a picture of, memorize it, where you have your movement formation in this column, when it gets used, and those 4 characteristics, how they play into each. So the squad column has good control, facilitates maneuver, and has good dispersion laterally and in depth, allows large volumes of fire to the flanks, but it's limited a little bit into the front, and it has good all-around security. And you can read through the rest to see how all of these characteristics play into the line and file as well. Now, I was quite a bit of information, but hopefully does prepare you or make you feel a little bit more comfortable with going out and understanding what you're walking into. So now I hope you're able to discuss and understand the purpose of security perimeters and all around security itself, as well as describe the 3 individual movement techniques that are implemented while we're moving under direct fire, understand those hand and arm signals, as well as the composition of the fire team and the rifle squad. And then now hopefully you know just a little bit more about the fire team and rifle squad formations, what they're used for, and when we use them and how we move in and out of them. Now, this is one of those things, basically all of these, you've got to go out and do some hands-on practice to really dive in and understand the material a little bit more. So go ask questions. Don't be afraid to grab your primary instructor or advisor. Get some questions out there. Find a high-speed MS3 or MS4 to practice with and to get critiques from. And then if anything, if you still can't get questions answered, you're more than welcome to try to contact me at silver.beatty, B-E-A-T-Y, at mso.umt.edu, and I can try to answer your question or at least direct you to the right place to get that answer for you. As always, thanks for sticking with me through this. I hope you enjoy the actual hands-on practice, and I will see you on the next one.